Winning the 4-H steer show means everything for two families for two very different reasons. As they grow their steers for the show, everyone in the family learns valuable lessons, some of them a little too late. This is the Ranch Girl Reads podcast for ranch gals who want to read stories that capture the realities of life outside the city limits. Many books are either unrealistic Western romances or action-packed adventures that aren't rooted in what real life is like. You want fresh stories without spending hours sifting through ones that don't fit the bill. I've been there. I'm here to introduce you to stories you can put on your backlist to share with your friends. Even better, share this podcast with them. I'm your host, Sequoia Branham, author of award-winning Western contemporary fiction In the Company of Cows and In Between Pastures. For today, let's dive into One Good Mama Bone by Bren McClain. Set in early 1950s rural South Carolina, One Good Mama Bone chronicles Sarah Kramer's quest to find her mama bone after she is left to care for a boy who is not her own, but instead is a product of an affair between her husband and her best friend and neighbor, a woman she calls sister. When her husband drinks himself to death, Sarah, a dirt-poor homemaker with no family to rely on, and the note on the farm long past due, must find a way for her and young Emerson Bridge to survive. But the more daunting obstacle is Sarah's fear that her mother's words, seared in her memory since she first heard them at the age of 6, were prophecy. You ain't got one good mama bone in you, girl. When Sarah reads in the local newspaper that a boy won $680 with his grand champion steer at the recent 1951 Fat Cattle Show and Sale, she sees this as her financial salvation and finds a way to get Emerson Bridge a steer from a local farmer to compete in the 1952 show. But the young calf is unsettled at Sarah's farm, crying out in distress and growing louder as the night wears on. Some 4 miles away, the steer's mother hears his cries and breaks out of a barbed wire fence to go in search of him. The next morning, Sarah finds the young steer quiet, content, and nursing a large cow. Inspired by the mother cow's act of love, Sarah names her Mama Red. And so Sarah's education in motherhood begins with Mama Red as her teacher. But Luther Dobbins, the man who sold Sarah the steer, has his sights set on winning too. And like Sarah, he is desperate, but not for money. Dobbins is desperate for glory, wanting to regain his lost Grand Champion dynasty, and he will stop at nothing to win. Emboldened by her lessons from Mama Red and her budding Mama Bone, Sarah is committed to victory even after she learns the winning steer's ultimate fate. Will she stop at nothing, even if it means betraying her teacher? One Good Mama Bone was a good read. I enjoyed this story. It did take me a little bit to get past the first little bit. The opening was a little bit sticky for me, but there is a beautiful gem of a story within once you get past that little opening. That, like I said, for me at least, was a little bit slow. The author uses a lot of characters, but does a really good job with it. I never got confused about who was who or how they all came together. And we have Sarah as our main character. She's a mother not by blood and not by choice, but determines to be the best mother that she can be. And as we see her make choices and make decisions based on that, we also see how those decisions are informed by the ghosts from her own childhood. And I think it's a really beautiful example of, I think, what's kind of, I don't know, I've seen floating around, Instagram, Facebook, all the places of breaking generational curses. Basically, I think in a lot of ways what it boils down to is being a better parent than what you had. And so we see Sarah do that in a really real way, and I think on a big scale. As you read and the ghosts of her past unfold, you understand the level of trauma that she has from her own childhood, and I think just how amazing it is of how she does not pass that down to this boy who is ultimately not even her son. I think the author does a really good job with that, but he also betrays really clearly that it's not a one and done situation. There are things that Sarah does with Emerson Bridge that you can see are informed by her childhood, and while I don't think they're ultimately wrong, they could be better. And it just shows that growth of, even as we try to quote unquote right that wrong from our childhood, there's still going to be mistakes that we make, and there's still going to be this period of growth where things don't look pretty. So I really enjoyed that. So that was a lot on Sarah, but she is a really great character. We also have Emerson Bridge, a young boy with such a sweet soul. He and Sarah are new to 4-H and steers and just agriculture as a whole, but but I think he shows a producer's heart when you get down to it. Kind of a theme throughout the book that Emerson Bridge comes back to is being a kind man, and he applies that to being kind to animals. We see this come up in a really real way that I think, as people in agriculture, especially with livestock, that's the area that I have experience in. Sometimes you do all you can do and it's not enough and the animal's still suffering, and we see Emerson Bridge face that and just have a sorrowful moment over, I love this steer, I want to be kind to him, but he's suffering and what I'm doing is not helping enough. And so, yeah, just as a ranch gal, I related to that very deeply. We also have the Dobbins family, a father that's struggling with his worth and is just a basket case of a character. McClain does a super good job of painting his character very well, and we understand through little bits throughout the story who he is, why he is the way he is, but wow, he is a character that needs some help in terms of being a healthy person. As Mr. Dobbins tries to prove his worth to his young son, he goes about it in all the wrong ways and ends up pushing his son further and further away, just around every bend. He makes an effort to do right, and it doesn't come out right, and then he gets mad, and then he's like, I'm just going off the deep end, I'm not gonna try. And it's this whole cycle throughout the story. But we get to see little Elsie grow over the course of the story in such a sweet way. I think it's a testament to the influence of the friends that we have around us, those friends' family, and also the impact that someone can do very small things and have an impact as well. And that kind of leads straight into Miss Dobbins, little Elsie's mother. She has a positive growth and a positive influence on little Elsie. I would like to dive into her character a little bit more, but at the same time, the story was very full, and so there might not really be room for it in this story, and that's okay. She was still a good character. So having a 4-H project as a main part of the book is always going to be a win for me, especially when the author does such a great job with the details as McClain did. So much so that I was in 4-H growing up and learned the 4-H pledge, and McClain has that as a part of the book, and it was so rooting to hear that pledge and it be correct word for word, and it just I think really gave credit to the rest of the story. So overall, the story kind of parallels these two boys with two very different families, two very different paths, and both of their families want to do a good job but go about it in a very different way. And in the middle of that is an old red mama cow that shows Sarah what it means to love and to be a good mama. And the way that McClain has written this, we do get some scenes that are from the cow's perspective, so we don't dive into her thoughts a ton, but we kind of see things a little bit from her vantage point. And while I think in some ways that's a little bit more on the nose than I personally would have written it, which is why I didn't write this book, and Bren McClain did, he did a super great job with it. Like I said, maybe it was a little bit more on the nose than I would have written it, but it really drew me back to think about what are we missing from animals that we could learn. And even I think as producers in agriculture, as ranchers, we can have a to-do list that's so long that we don't stop and sit and wonder as much as maybe we should. And so this just reminded me of that there's so much beauty and so much that we can glean from all of creation all around us. Overall, McClain does a really good job of carrying just the whole storyline all the way through the book, and wrapping up the 4-H project aspect of the story really well and in a really satisfying way. The setting is in South Carolina, and while I've never been to South Carolina, I didn't feel like there were details that felt super unique to there that rooted me in that place very deeply. However, it still worked. I was able to imagine it in an area that I was a little bit more familiar with, and the story still came together very well. As I mentioned, I would have loved to dive into Miss Dobbins' character a little bit deeper if we could have, but she's still a great character. The one thing that did not sit with me was the ending. So without spoilers, I'll try to paint this picture. The story ending itself is satisfying. There's no cliffhanger or bits that didn't get answered. Like I said, all of the threads of the story get carried through to the end. However, there's a scene that ends on a much heavier note than I feel was needed, and then I feel this rest of the story prepared me for. The heart of the scene is to convey the consequences of our actions and attitudes towards others, specifically in this case, the actions and attitudes of a father towards his son. However, I just didn't feel like the story beforehand set me up for the gravity of what this scene shares. Overall, it's definitely a story worth visiting. It's not set as deeply in agriculture and definitely not in ranching as some stories that I love and have on the list to share with y'all, but it highlights a mother's heart and a producer's heart, and I think that's something that we can connect with. This one is for older audiences, I would say. The heavy scene at the end of the story that I mentioned includes suicide. While it is not depicted graphically, it was jarring for myself, like I said, due to the lack of preparation for it. So, all that to say, I enjoyed the story, and here's a little quote that I pulled to be able to share with you. On her knees against the linoleum floor, Sarah Kramer ran her flat hand over the 2 shelves in her kitchen cupboard, patting every inch of the whitewashed wood as if she was searching for something lost. She was searching for food to feed their boy. This was in the early morning, just before the sun shone itself. She would like to have pulled on the light over the table to help her see, but electricity cost good money, and she and Harold were already 2 months behind on their light bill. She thought about burning the kerosene lamp, but kerosene cost a whole nickel a quart, and only 1 finger high remained on the jar, so Sarah patted in the dark. But all she could feel that morning was crumbs. So that kind of sets the stage of where the story starts for you. I listened to the audio version of this book and enjoyed it. The narrator does a great job. It is also available in paperback and ebook as well. And I will have a link for you to be able to grab it in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts and send this episode to a friend. Word of mouth is the top way that both podcasts and books reach new people to enjoy them. For a bite-sized introduction to a story set deeply in the ranching lifestyle of West Texas, hop on over to my website for your free first chapter of In the Company of Cows, sequoiabranham.com/newsletter. That will be linked in the show notes as well. Now for a little nugget of what I've been chewing on lately. I've had so many amazing people around me that support me and believe in me over the years, and that's no different today as I am beginning the podcast and several other things as well. I also have people that inspire me and probably will never know it, at least to the degree of which they inspire me. Shout out to my husband for getting excited with me when I want to start yet another project. It's not like I don't already have multiple books in the works, a couple to sell, and a podcast that I just launched. Never mind the 2 horses that I have in training. I also want to shout out my mom for being an amazing support system. She'll drive across 2 states to go sit at a table and help me sell books for 4 days straight, or text dozens of people about my newest launch. Everyone needs a mom like mine. A few people who are inspiring me from afar. I have been soaking up pretty much everything Jada Paula is putting out. I love her Cowboy Girl Conversations series she has on YouTube. Of course, her newest song, Steady, and her shirts are the best. I appreciate her boldness of faith and just the quality that she produces everything with. Sage Wilkes is the owner of Is an Oak Boutique and has amazing style. We've gotten to meet a couple times, and she is just such a gem. I love watching her as she takes her boutique amazing places and just lives life so fully. It's so fun and so inspiring to me. So that is all I have for today, folks. I hope y'all grab a copy of One Good Mama Bone and check it out. Until next time.